ready to ditch the history books and time travel. We're diving deep into 14th century Italy today, but we're swapping those dusty old textbooks for something way more personal. The Letters of Catherine Benincasa.
Oh, Catherine Benincasa. Talk about a woman ahead of her time. Her letters, they're like peeking right into the past.
They're more than just history, though, right? It's almost like she's giving us this guidebook, for life, for faith, even for politics. It's incredible.
Totally. And to think, she was writing during the 1300s. I mean, picture Italy then. The Black Death, talk about a nightmare, had just swept through Europe. The church, struggling with corruption. And politically, forget about it. City-states, wars, chaos everywhere.
What a time to be alive. Though I guess every era has its challenges, huh?
Yeah, you got a point there. But think about it. Out of all that turmoil, Catherine Benincasa, a woman, and not from some powerful family either, she becomes this leading figure.
It's not every day you find a woman from that era advising, major political leaders, right? Calling for reform and everything. That takes some serious guts.
No kidding. And you know what fueled her? Faith.
Mm-hmm.
Catherine, she lived and breathed her spirituality. We're talking visions, even the stigmata.
Wow, the stigmata. Okay, now that's intense.
Right. But here's the thing. Catherine's faith wasn't about hiding away from the world's problems. If anything, it pushed her right into the thick of them. She believed the church, the very institution meant to guide people towards God, had, well, kind of lost its way.
Gone astray, so to speak.
Exactly. Catherine saw the church getting bogged down with worldly issues, power struggles, wealth, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she wasn't afraid to call them out on it.
Yeah, and she didn't mince words. There's that line she wrote, "I see the Christian religion lying like a dead man, and I neither mourn nor weep over him." That's powerful stuff.
Absolutely. It's more like a call to arms than just some sad observation.
Right.
And that's the thing about Catherine. She wasn't just pointing fingers. She wanted action, real change. And get this, she took it straight to the top. Popes, high-ranking officials, she confronted them head-on.
No way. She must have been incredibly brave. To challenge those in power, back then especially, that's unheard of.
It's incredible, right? And what's fascinating is that she urged these powerful figures to embrace humility, poverty, and service, to live simply.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, imagine having that kind of courage to not just see what needs fixing, but to actually fight for it.
It really makes you think about what it means to actually live by your convictions. We talk about making a difference, but she went out and did it. Catherine wasn't all talk. She challenged the status quo head on. So we've seen this fearless reformer side of Catherine. But reading her letters, it's clear she's got this whole other side, this deep spiritual wisdom. And it's surprisingly relevant even now. She talks about this thing called spiritual self-will. Seems kind of contradictory, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's almost like she knew how easy it is to get caught up in appearances, even in our spiritual lives,
Right. It's like it's more about how it looks than what's actually going on inside.
Exactly. For Catherine, spiritual self-will was all about picking practices that made you look good, not those that truly aligned with God's will,
So someone could be doing all the right things, outwardly, but their heart's not really in it.
Right. Like, she'd probably tell us to forget about the fancy incense and the Instagram-worthy prayer beads.
Yeah, so true.
Focus on the real stuff. Humility, compassion, treating each other right. It's not about how many yoga retreats you've been on. It's about how you act in everyday life.
Okay, that's a good reality check. But how do we even know if we're falling into that trap? It's not like we're doing it on purpose.
Yeah, it often happens unconsciously. You're right. That's where Catherine's idea of discretion comes in. And she doesn't mean keeping your faith a secret. It's more about, self-awareness in your spiritual life.
So taking a step back, asking yourself some tough questions. Am I doing this for the right reasons? Is this really feeding my soul or just my ego?
Exactly. It's about this deep, authentic connection with the divine, not just chasing spiritual highs.
And that reminds me, Catherine's view on, physical mortification, it's always seemed so level-headed to me. When she wrote to Sister Daniela, who was being way too hard on herself, Catherine told her, "Take every day the food that is needed to restore nature. Undertake a regular life in moderation." She didn't advocate for extremes, did she?
Nope, not at all. Catherine was all about that middle ground. No indulging too much, no punishing yourself either. It's about listening to your body.
Finding that balance, right?
Yes, and taking care of your physical needs. Because for her, that was part of spiritual well-being too. She wouldn't have slapped a green juice in your hand and called it a day.
It's fascinating how much her words resonate, even now, And it's not just about personal spirituality with Catherine, is it?
Not at all. Catherine, she lived her faith, For her, Real transformation, inner growth. It had to mean something out in the world, too.
Right, like all her work advocating for peace
Right.
and justice. She wasn't content just like praying for things to get better. She was out there trying to make it happen.
Exactly. And that makes me think about something we haven't touched on yet, something Catherine struggled with herself.
Mm.
Impatience. Kind of surprising, right?
Mm.
This spiritual powerhouse dealing with something so, well, human.
It is kind of funny when you think about it, right? We put these historical figures up on pedestals, forget they were real people too, dealing with real stuff.
Totally. And Catherine always wanted to keep it real. She actually talks about these struggles in her letters. There's this one line she writes, "Patience could hardly have been one of the virtues most native to the woman's valiant spirit. She had herself known the bitter and corroding power of the sin that burns and does not consume." I mean, wow, right?
Yeah, wow. It's actually, I don't know, kind of comforting. Like, even someone like Catherine Benincasa, she had her own battles going on. Makes it feel more relatable, you know?
100%. And for Catherine, it wasn't about pretending those struggles didn't exist. It was about understanding them.
Hmm.
Like she believed in patience, that frustration we feel when things don't go our way. It often comes from, well, self-love.
Self-love, huh? So being too focused on what we want, on our own timeline.
Exactly. It's like we forget there might be a bigger picture, a different way of looking at things. And, this ties into another big theme for Catherine, forgiveness. You can't really have one without the other, can you?
Oh, interesting. Because she was a huge advocate for forgiveness, even with people who'd really messed up. So you're
Mhm.
saying impatience. It's like holding on to ourselves too tightly, while forgiveness is about letting go.
You got it. They're both about freedom, in a way. Impatience traps us in our own little bubbles of frustration, while forgiveness, that's where real peace starts to come in.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? The more we cling to anger, resentment, all that, the worse we feel. Easier said than done, though, right? Forgiving someone, especially if they've hurt you deeply.
Oh, for sure. It's not about brushing things under the rug, pretending everything's fine.
Mm.
It's more about perspective, I think. Catherine, she believed that true forgiveness, it starts by seeing the humanity in the person who hurt you, remembering they're flawed, capable of messing up, just like all of us.
So it's an act of compassion, in a way, for them, but also for ourselves, sure.
Beautifully said. And this brings us back to Catherine's legacy. It's one thing to talk about spirituality, forgiveness, all that, but she lived it, actively chose it every single day.
She was on the front lines, fighting for the sick, the poor, taking on the powerful when she needed to. It's pretty inspiring, you know. Makes you think, what could we do if we all brought that kind of fire to our own lives?
That's the question Catherine leaves us with, isn't it? What impact do we want to have on the world? What will our legacy be?
Quite a deep dive today. We've gone from Black Death, Italy to, well, some pretty profound self-reflection, haven't we?
We have, and hopefully these are conversations that'll stay with us long after we stop recording.
To Catherine Benincasa, then. A woman ahead of her time whose words still have the power to challenge and inspire us centuries later. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep.